Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel, Cynicalex. And for this Dr. Octopus new uniform review, a lot is going to feel familiar, and yet a lot has changed for him. Because in terms of the damage, you're going to see a massive bump for him. And this is not exactly a one-shot of Proxima, but this is pretty close. On the other hand, in terms of the build and in terms of the gameplay, you're basically going to see no change, which is really, really nice. So for those of you who played Dr. Octopus 2 years ago when he got the Hydra Empire update uniform, you can basically jump right back into playing the character. And for those of you who have never played with Dr. Octopus before, you're also in for a treat because, like I just showed you, he's very straightforward and very easy to play. However, the one trick or the one sort of quirk uniqueness of him that can give players some confusion is his uniform bonus, because his uniform bonus is really where a lot of his offense and defense comes from. And I sort of wish the devs had tweaked this a little bit. I'm not complaining or anything like that or calling for reworks and such, but basically, as you can see here, is when he uses his third skill, he gets a 15% heal and he gets a 200% damage proc. Now that 200% damage proc will stack with any other damage procs that you have. So this is very important to note, but it's also very important to note underneath that in green, it says cooldown time 10 seconds. So unfortunately, Otto can only heal with his third skill every 10 seconds, even though you can use Tentacle Shockwave. I mean, with maximum skill cooldown, you can use it every 7.5 seconds. If for some reason you have 0 skill cooldown, why would you do that? Then you can use it every 15 seconds, so I guess it wouldn't really matter to you. But if you had 0 cooldown, you would have a lot of other problems. And before you ask, I'll tell you that having more skill cooldown on your cards does not affect passive cooldowns like this. Skill cooldown on your cards is only going to affect active abilities like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6th skills that characters have. It never affects passives that have some sort of internal cooldown, because that would just be broken. You know, if Wolverine's cooldown has 1 second and you could cut that down to half a second, you could effectively double his healing and he would heal for 8% or 12% of his HP per second. And then he'd finally be meta again. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, because you can't change that cooldown, you basically have a situation where Dr. Octopus's damage is going to fluctuate. And you're going to see a really huge burst every other rotation. Not kidding. It's really funny. And it also means that if you want to become a master Dr. Octopus player, you're going to have to keep that 10-second cooldown timer in mind, because I don't believe there is an icon on the screen to show you that it has counted down. There actually might be. Let me jump into some other content and see if we can figure this out. So we're jumping into stage 19 of Null. He's got a crit damage 140 proc obelisk. So when I combine that with his uniform, I can achieve a 340% damage increase that I'm going to be passing over to the 6th skill. We're also using Electro lead here just because it's the best lead for the Sinister 6, but keep in mind I'm not going to be using Electro for anything. So here we go. We get huge burst of damage on the first rotation, nearly 10 bars, which is fantastic. We are going to use the co-op skill here. Keep in mind that his co-op skill will often do his third skill. So you have to keep that in mind. Dr. Octopus, here's the best way of explaining it. Very easy to play, very easy to pick up and learn, difficult to master. If you really want to become a master of Dr. Octopus, it is going to be more difficult to do. So you can see there, I just goofed it up. I didn't press the third skill. So I think what you're looking for is when you press the third skill that the little icon in the top left is going to activate. So you can see there that it activated and it turned purple for just 1 second. It's a very brief animation, but that will tell you that the uniform effect is active. And then you can see here, I did my next rotation, and the damage is pretty good. I got about 3 bars, but the purple icon did not activate. Now I'm going to show it to you one more time here. There we go. The purple icon did activate. We passed our proc, and then instead of getting 2 bars, we got a lot closer to like 5 bars. So this is really going to be the sort of quirk and the uniqueness of Dr. Octopus, but he is, I think, quite good. So we're going to continue this run so you guys can see just how good he is. He honestly, in some ways, keeps up with Electro, which is kind of impressive, but we also are using Electro's lead, so that is worth something there too. But yeah, the rotation is really easy. He's got more burst damage than ever, which is super duper nice. And come on. Ooh, I don't think we're going to make it. Just what a jabroni. What a jabroni. Just a little bit of damage. Now there, you can see I just did 5. If you're ever in a situation with Dr. Octopus and you have just a little bit of HP to go on an enemy before you're going to knock them into their next phase, like when you know it's their next phase, or for example, Mephisto's next life, like he's just got a little bit of damage left, don't do your third skill. Save it, right? Because the time it takes here, this is less than 10 seconds. And even if it's exactly 10 seconds, why would you risk lowering the damage of your next rotation by 200%? It's a massive amount, right? So I give you guys these warnings because it's really a huge difference, right? He still does, like, the good thing is he still does really good damage without the proc, but he also does really good burst damage with it. And if I had iframe ignore, I would have been able to push him to the next phase. So yeah, that's really the key thing to understand and to practice with Dr. Octopus, is just managing that 10-second cooldown, because your normal proc has a 7-second cooldown, right? CTPs all have a 7-second cooldown, and so you're in a situation where you may not want to do it in certain rotations just to save it for other rotations. Like for example, this one right here, we're just gonna do 5 and 4. And just sort of edge him, just sort of, you know, bit by bit. And I'm doing this, of course, so that we can pop off with the 6th skill. And that's the other thing you need to manage, is that 6th skill proc lining up. You never want to cast Dr. Octopus's 6th skill without, oh, we took a lot of damage there, but you never want to cast his 6th skill without the 3rd skill proc. That would be a damage mistake. That would be a blunder. And you would lose a lot of damage and a lot of time for that. So there we go. That was 2 minutes left on stage 19, which is very, very good, right? This is very, very good. And it's actually a little bit better than it looks, because in the comparison I made with Electro, I'm not saying he's better than Electro, but in the comparison, Electro was using his own lead, which means he could bring in 2 supports. Now, that effectively means that Electro could probably climb higher than Dr. Octopus, given that they're both human villains. They really share almost every single tag besides the speed versus combat tag. But the value is there that for Electro, he buffs himself. So you can always drop Dr. Octopus and bring in someone else like Mystique or Proxima. In Dr. Octopus's case, if you want to use his leadership, it's hilariously bad. 30% HP. It may be okay for something like Alliance Conquest, but it's not really going to work for you anywhere else. The only other option would be in the future, if we get a rework for a character or an upgrade for a character like Black Cat, you could use her lead, which also gives a support, and then he would effectively essentially have a dual support. So yeah, I think Dr. Octopus is really good. And he's actually also surprisingly good. I don't want to get your hopes up too high, but he's surprisingly good for Infinity Ultron. So we're going to use Sif here. Sif is a really good support for Dr. Octopus. So if you really want to make the most of your Dr. Octopus, I would say consider transcending Sif with the new uniform. Because not only is she a lead for him to give him HP and physical attack, which is great, but then she also gives all allies all speed and 45% damage to boss types. That's just a PvE buff or bonus that doesn't apply to PvP because they're not boss types. But it's very, very good for him. It's a very good dual thing. And of course, Sif is way cheaper than someone like Electro. And she's actually going to offer Dr. Octopus more than Electro offers him, which is super duper interesting. So you can see here, I don't want to go through the whole fight, but yeah, you pop off, dude. He has really high burst damage. There again, we forgot to use the 3rd skill, but you know what? That actually doesn't matter. If you forget to use the 3rd skill, oh, I used it after the fact? What? I think my thing was lagging. All right, sure. I don't know what happened, but yeah, if you actually skipped, you could, I'm not saying you should, but you could skip the 3rd skill on every other rotation to make sure that whenever you cast it, the buff is always up. Again, I wouldn't recommend it just because if you get used to not casting something, then you're going to forget when it matters. So I would say just you know, rotate between 5 cancel, 3 cancel, 6, and then 5 cancel 5 cancel 3 cancel 4, right? I would just or 3 cancel 5 cancel 4. That doesn't really matter. I would sort of bounce between those 2 rotations to make sure that he does the most damage, because 3 and 5 are basically instantly cancelable and you do get some of the damage, and then you can land on 4. Some people say you can cancel 4. it really doesn't matter to cancel 4, and it's honestly a huge risk to add 4 to your rotation when you're doing 6, because like I said, if you miss the proc, if you miss the passing of the Tentacle Shockwave proc onto the 6, you lose the damage. Like, you're gonna lose tons of damage. And when I say miss the proc or miss passing the proc, what I mean is the reason why you cancel so quickly is that when you press the 3rd skill and you activate the proc effect, then it's waiting 5 seconds. You can see it's counting down 3, 2. It's counting down. As soon as you press another skill and the skill makes a hit, it's going to count the proc as being passed to that skill. So you can see here, it's being, well, it actually doesn't show up, interestingly enough. I thought it was going to disappear. But basically, the reason why you cancel 3 right away is to pass it over. If you let these skills play out, or if you're not fast enough canceling and other skills hit, then you're going to, like, let's say you do 3, 5, 6, but you're slow, and you see there was a couple of hits on 5 that happened before 6, that would ruin my damage, because now the proc went on a 5 instead of 6, and 5 does less damage than 6. So you do have to be really fast, and you want to make sure that you can sort of master this. You can practice this in skill preview or whatever, but you want to make sure when you're passing a buff like that, a damage proc buff, that you can cancel quickly enough, because then the first skill that makes contact with a hit is the skill that's going to receive that buff. It's also probably the skill that's going to trigger your obelisk buff, which is also going to stack, which is also very, very important. So because of all the build qualities that he have that have basically been unchanged for 2 years, which is really nice to see, the devs didn't go anywhere crazy with him, you can still recommend, you know, a crit damage, ignore dodge obelisk. That would be great for him. He doesn't have much. He actually has no ignore dodge, so ignore dodge would be quite clutch for him. Beyond ignore dodge and crit damage, you could go with the CTP of energy. That would be excellent, because he already has now he has the chain hit damage, the 20%. So you could bump him up to 50% chain hit, which is pretty ridiculous. He also has guaranteed crit rate, which is really nice if you just want to use a CTP of Rage on him. And the nice thing about the CTP of Rage, sort of like how Shang-Chi has all that chain hit damage, is that you sort of get the best of both worlds. With a Rage, you don't have to worry too much about your subsequent rotations when the 3rd skill proc is on cooldown, because you don't have to worry about procking on a skill, but you also get the damage proc every time you want to cancel quickly for that 6th skill bomb. Now, the Rage is also kind of tricky, because you can't forget to cancel on the rotations where the 3rd skill is active, right? Rage just allows you to do damage for the full 5 seconds, but it's not going to make the 3rd skill proc different. It's still going to act, it's still going to behave the same way. So if you cancel 3 into 5 into 4 slowly, you're gonna mess it up. So I caution players against Rage a little bit, because you sort of still have to maintain that proc mentality of 10 seconds, but it's still nice because he has the flexibility, right? That guaranteed crit rate means the Rage is gonna pop off pretty consistently, and it's also why characters that don't have guaranteed crit are usually not recommended for a Rage, because they can't proc it often. Last but not least, I want to do a little bit of ABX talk, because a lot of people have been asking if Dr. Octopus can replace Kingpin or be as good as Kingpin, and I understand why that question is asked, because Kingpin's uniform is full cost and also seasonal, meaning it's not going to be back into the rotation of sellable uniforms for another like 5-6 months. However, I do want to point out, at least for the burn season, and there's 3 seasons of ABX, there's burn, silence, and paralysis, Dr. Octopus doesn't have burn on any of his skills. Now, you can get away with using Kingpin to trigger the burn, either by switching to Kingpin or by having Kingpin strike for you strategically, sort of like how Cyclops strikes for Cable, but that's much harder, much more difficult, and much more inconsistent. But yeah, I do have to point that out, that for 33% of the ABX rotation, Dr. Octopus cannot cancel the Beast's roar by himself. And so because of that, you have a situation where you have to swap. So immediately, in my mind, that downgrades his value. If you're not really interested in getting top scores, then sure, Dr. Octopus is a great alternative to Kingpin, although he's not that much cheaper than Kingpin. I will say that. He's obviously much easier to get. You can get him right now, you can get him in 2 weeks, etc. But yeah, Kingpin's only 600 crystals more, and Kingpin can cancel all 3 seasons. Very easy to play. And with ABX, it's sort of like you're either all in, or you're doing the bare minimum. And in doing the bare minimum, you probably don't want to build up both of these characters for ABX. And so giving them both a Rage is obviously 1 Rage, 1 CTP more expensive, So I would say if you have Kingpin, just stick with Kingpin. He's very, very good for it. I'm super happy I was able to retire Apocalypse after all those years. But Dr. Octopus is pretty good, and I'll show you some of that. This is only with a crit damage 180 proc obelisk, so obviously you can go way higher than this with a CTP of energy, with a mighty CTP of destruction, with a CTP of rage. But I wanted to show you that he's actually still pretty good. Like 15 seconds in and I'm already over 1,000,000 points. Like this is not bad at all. You just have to be very quick with the canceling, even faster than you are in World Boss Legends and things like that, because of the fact you can splash in the second skill a little bit, because of the fact that he has so many enemies to hit, and any one of them can like any one of those hits can trigger the proc and pass your proc early and lose you a lot of damage. So you do have to be very, very vigilant of that and very, very quick to cancel. But if you can get it down, like, dude kind of pops. We waited there. I probably shouldn't have waited, but I wanted to make sure that the buff was passed over to the third skill there. See, yeah, this one hasn't been as good as the other ones that I've done. But see here, I have to switch to Kingpin because I don't have another choice. So you can, there's some switch play that you can do that actually works out. I'm not an ABX pro. I don't really dabble in this too much. So I don't want my advice to be too, you know, have too much weight here. You're much better off waiting for the real ABX pros to do more testing. And there's a possibility, there's definitely a possibility that there is a way to use both of these characters to their full value. But again, that's for the players who want to invest fully in ABX, right? For people who don't, and you actually saw a little bit of burn damage there from Kingpin striking, which is pretty funny. That is sort of by chance, right? When Dr. Octopus, I believe, gets hit, there's like a 20% chance for Kingpin to pop in. So you can see like the scores are pretty good. My top score is up there in the top right. I got just under 9.6 million. I was able to get just under 9 million with Dr. Octopus, swapping between him and Kingpin, primarily playing Dr. Octopus. So he's honestly not bad at all. Like, he's actually good for ABX. Again, I think Kingpin is just straight up easier because he doesn't need anyone else. You can use his own leadership. Like, you can use that's the other thing for Dr. Octopus. You don't have a leadership, right? So if you don't use Kingpin, if you don't have him, you have to use someone like Crossbones. Like, you know, you don't want to buy another uniform there. And then you're also going to have to switch to Crossbones to cancel, which is going to lose you a ton of points because, no offense to Gravity Punch, but Crossbones is not going to do damage like tier 3 Kingpin. So you not only have the leadership issue to worry about, you could use Abomination, but again, Abomination, although he has a better leadership than Kingpin, he doesn't have burn. So then you're stuck either switching to Taskmaster and then having to build him, or not canceling for 1/3 of the seasons. You're fine for Silence and you're fine for Paralysis, which is awesome. He can do that, and he'll probably be very good for those weeks. But then it's burn, where you either fall back to Kingpin, fall back even further to Apocalypse, or you kind of have to take a much lower score. So I'm really happy with Dr. Octopus's build and rework. I really can't see anything wrong with this character. He's strictly PvE. For those of you wondering why I haven't talked anything about PvP, there's no way this dude is going to have an impact in PvP. He basically has 0 abilities for PvP. He has a couple of iframes, but even his iframes are not that long for like iframe cheese. And then he doesn't have any other effects. He doesn't have any iframe ignore, reflect, and like any of this stuff. He has like incapacitation on a couple skills, no fracture, nothing. So yeah, and then he doesn't even have very high base stats, as we talked about yesterday with Electro, comparing their HP. Like, Electro's HP is that his base HP is like 3,000 points higher, meaning that Dr. Octopus is strictly a PvE option. But I think he's a fantastic PvE option at that, especially considering how easy he is to farm for and build up. And he's going to be in all future Transcended selectors, which basically means he'll be free for you when one of those rolls around. So you could definitely wait until the anniversary, pick up his uniform 50% off, and then choose him from the Transcendent selector and have yourself, you know, the second best combat villain in the game right now. I think so. Yeah, pretty amazing. Or you could probably call him the best if he can, you know, pass Kingpin and other PvE content besides ABX. So yeah, I'm really happy with Dr. Octopus. I'm gonna, again, I can't wait to, I really want to see how far we can push these Sinister Sixes. So I'm gonna give him a CTP, maybe energy. I'm actually gonna try that out and then see how well he rocks in different content. But in the meantime, hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know your thoughts on Otto Octavius. Smash the like button, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.